Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya. Vishnu Paramahansa Babarajikacharya, Sri Svedesi, Bhaktivedanta Samsara Prabhupada ki Jai, Namacharya Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Prem Sangho, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Sri Gaur, Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai, Sri Radha Krishna, Gopa Gopita, Shama Kunda Radha Kunda, Giri Govardhan ki Jai, Sri Vrindavan Dham ki Jai, Navatab Dham ki Jai, Ganga Jamuna Tulsi, Bhakti Devi ki Jai, Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki Jai, Go Premanandi, all glories to Sam of the devotees, all glories to Sam of the devotees, all glories to Sam of the devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnu Banaya Krishna Bristaya Bhutale Shimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswata Deve Gauravani Prachadane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachalesha Tadane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasudi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 11, Chapter 1, Verse 2. Ekopita sabahu pandu suta sapatnyaya. Dorjuta hela nakacha grahanadi vistan. Kritvani mitam itaret tarat sametan. Hatva nirahat kshiti bharam ishaha. Yea, they who kopita were angered, bahu excessively, Pandu Suta, the sons of Pandu, Sapatnyaya, by their enemies, Dudyuta, by duplicitous gambling, Helana, insults, Kacha Grahana, grabbing the hair of Draupadi, Adi, and other impetuses, Tan, them, Kritva, Nimittam, immediate cause, Itrata, confronting one another on opposite sides, Sametan, all assembled, Hatva, killing, Nirapan, the kings, Niraharat, took away once and for all, Kshiti, of the earth, Baram, burden, Isha, Supreme Lord. Translation: because the sons of Pandu were enraged by the numerous offenses of their enemies, such as duplicitous gambling, verbal insults, seizing of Draupadi's hair, and many other cruel transgressions, the Supreme Lord engaged those Pandavas as the immediate cause to execute his will. On the pretext of the Battle of Kurukshetra, the Lord arranged for all the kings who were burdening the earth to assemble with their armies on opposite sides of the battlefield, and when the Lord killed them through the agency of war, the earth was relieved of its burden. Purport: the Pandavas were repeatedly harassed by their enemies, such as Duryodhana and Dushasana. As innocent young princes, the Pandavas had no enemy, but Duryodhana was constantly plotting against his helpless cousins. The Pandavas were sent to a house of lac, which was later burned to the ground. They were administered poison, and their chaste wife Draupadi was publicly insulted when her hair was pulled, and an attempt was made to strip her naked. Throughout these dangers, Lord Sri Krishna constantly protected the Pandavas, who were fully surrendered to him and who knew no shelter other than him. In this verse, the word itaretarata is significant. Previous to the battle of Kurukshetra, Krishna had personally killed many demons, including Putana, Keshi, Aghasura, and Kamsa. Now, Krishna wanted to complete his mission of removing the earth's burden by killing the remaining impious persons. But as stated here, Kritva Nimittam, the Lord did not personally kill, but empowered his devotees Arjuna and the other Pandavas to remove the impious kings. Thus, acting personally and through his immediate expansion, Balaram, as well as by empowering his pure devotees such as the Pandavas, Krishna fully displayed the pastimes of the Yuga avatar by re-establishing religious principles and ridding the world of demons. Although the general purpose of the Kurukshetra battle was to kill the demons, by Krishna's arrangement, some great devotees such as Bhishma also appeared to be inimical toward the Lord. But as described in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam by the words Hatha Gata Swarupam, many great devotees played with Krishna's enemies and, upon being killed by Krishna, returned immediately to his abode in the spiritual sky in their original spiritual bodies. Because God is absolute, by his killing he simultaneously removes the demons from the earth and encourages his pure devotees. Translation: because the sons of Pandu were enraged by the numerous offenses of their enemies, such as duplicitous gambling, verbal insults, seizing of Draupadi's hair, and many other cruel transgressions, the Supreme Lord engaged those Pandavas as the immediate cause to execute his will. On the pretext of the battle of Kurukshetra, Lord Krishna arranged for all the kings who were burdening the earth to assemble with their armies on opposite sides of the battlefield, and when the Lord killed them through the agency of war, the earth was relieved of its burden. So the previous verse mentioned how the Lord made arrangements to remove the burden of the earth. And of course, Krishna killed many demons like Kamsa and his associates, but there were many demons which created a great burden. Even if the main demons were gone, still the earth was overburdened. And therefore he arranged for this war in which millions and millions of people were killed. So this means that in this way the demons were finally eradicated. Of course, we can also say that ultimately in Kali Yuga, again, demons appeared. So even though the battle of Kurukshetra took place when Parikshit was in power, then he saw that Kali Yuga was starting, and again, the demonic influence was growing. Of course, we can say that the demons were not individual strong demons as they were in Krishna's time, but nevertheless there was a prevalence of tamasic guna arising with the advent of Kali Yuga. So it was ultimately inevitable that Dharma would perish or decrease and adharma would increase. So we know that in Kali Yuga only 1/4 of Dharma is left. In Dwapara Yuga we have 1/2 of Dharma left, but then this decreases by 1/4 in Kali Yuga. So it was inevitable that adharma would increase again. However, at that particular time, Krishna manifested his form in this world, and he, you can say, completely annihilated the demonic elements at that time at the wish of the earth and the devatas, including Lord Brahma. So that is described here in these two verses where it shows how Krishna removed that burden. So he did it personally by killing many demons, and he did it through others. So that is indicated here when it talks about the Pandavas who were tormented by the other Kurus. So Krishna supported them, and he used them in order to annihilate all of the other demons. So the word nimitta is used, which means, in general, means a cause, and sometimes it means the efficient cause. Like we have the Lord is the efficient cause of this world, because he glances and then matter starts to transform. But then the other meaning, of course, is that it becomes an instrument. So namitta means the instrument. So the Lord uses the Pandavas as his instrument for annihilating the demons. Just as in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also says that to Arjuna, you can become my instrument and help me in this battle of Kurukshetra. So in other words, it means that the Pandavas acted according to the will of the Lord. They became his instrument in the sense that they followed his desires. And when Krishna wanted them to fight, they fought. And this was the immediate cause of the annihilation of the enemies and relieving the earth of its burden. The Pandavas fought, they won, and they killed all of the opposing elements. And then adharma was annihilated by this. So they were the immediate cause. But it was the will of Krishna. And how did they get the power? Because of Krishna. Ultimately, everything is dependent on the Lord. So therefore, whatever powers the devotees have to execute the Lord's will, ultimately they arise from the Lord himself. So he endows the devotees with certain powers by which they can execute very nicely his desires. So in this way they become the instruments of the Supreme Lord. So sometimes the Lord acts personally. Other times he may act indirectly, as in this case, and the Pandavas do the work for him. Nevertheless, ultimately it's the Lord's will, and it's the Lord's Shakti involved in this, so that the work can be accomplished in a perfect manner. So this is natural for the Lord to endow his devotees with certain powers, because he is ultimately controlled by his devotee, and he will bestow all wonderful qualities upon them. So one of the qualities of liberation, the 5 types of liberation, is Sharshti, which means one gets all sorts of powers. So the Lord is powerful. If one goes to the spiritual world, one can also get powers. And this may, in one sense, be like yoga siddhis. One can do all sorts of fantastic things simply by one's will. So one can get great powers. Certain things, of course, one cannot do, and this will distinguish the Lord from every other living entity. So certain things that are the special nature of the Lord. He can create the material world. The jiva cannot do that. The jiva cannot start glancing over prakriti and cause mahatattva to manifest, etc. The jiva does not do that. So the jiva has great powers, but still there is some limitation on what he can do. The Lord has certain powers which are reserved for him alone. So the Lord will endow the devotee with all these wonderful qualities. Of course, we say we can get 50 out of 64 qualities. So the Lord endows the devotee with these wonderful qualities. And these devotees become very attractive because of all these wonderful qualities. So the Lord does this out of great affection for the devotee. And in one sense, the devotee becomes equal or very similar to the Supreme Lord. He doesn't become the Lord, but he develops great similarity. So just as his form is spiritual, so he develops all sorts of spiritual qualities. And the form is similar to the Lord's form. In Vaikuntha, the devotee gets a four-arm form like the Lord. And here, in other cases, like in Goloka, then they become cowherd people like the Lord. So they develop similar form. So they also get similar types of qualities. So in Vaikuntha, then they are endowed with all sorts of wonderful powers because Vishnu himself is displaying many great powers. So the devotees also get all these great powers, and they often exhibit these powers. So there's similarity in form, and there's similarity in qualities. This is the great mercy of the Supreme Lord upon the devotee. He gives them all of these different qualities. So, because of his great attraction for the devotee. And when the devotee has great similarity, then there can be great relationship. If the devotees in Vaikuntha are very, very different from the Supreme Lord, then the Lord cannot relate with those devotees. Or if the devotees in Vrindavan are very different from the Supreme Lord there, Krishna the cowherd boy, then there cannot be a development of relationship there also. So the forms and the qualities of similarity are there because of they help produce a good relationship between the Lord and his devotee. And it is through that relationship that we get rasa, and from rasa we get bliss. So ultimately, the end result of all of this is bliss for the Lord and for the devotee by manifesting these wonderful qualities and forms. Of course, the devotee always wants to act according to the will of the Lord. He'll do everything to please the Lord. If the Lord wants something, the devotee tries to please the Lord by offering that to the Lord. So if the Lord wants the Pandavas to annihilate all the demons, then the Pandavas are willing to do that. That's their service to the Lord. They act on behalf of the Lord. So this is a type of devotional service. In this case, of course, when we have pastimes in the material world, the service looks a little bit different, because in this battle of Kurukshetra, we find that many people had to die. So in the spiritual world, there is no death. But in the material world, because there are demons here, the pastimes sometimes have a ghastly effect because there's killing taking place. So in this particular pastime, in order to please the Lord, the Pandavas had to annihilate all the different demons. They had to kill them all. So therefore we find that Kurukshetra was filled with dead bodies because of the war. But this was will of the Supreme Lord in relation to the material world. So the will was annihilate the demons so that the burden of the earth could be removed. That was the will of the Lord. So therefore the Pandavas executed that desire of the Lord. And finally, the result was that the demons were killed, earth was relieved of the burden, and the Lord's mission on earth was accomplished. And then after that, then he could disappear. He could withdraw himself from this material world. So the devotees act on behalf of the Supreme Lord, in this case, for the war. It's described here how the Pandavas were persecuted in many ways by the members of the Kuru dynasty, and they had to tolerate all of this. And finally, the Lord himself became very disturbed by this harassment, and therefore he made this arrangement of the war by which all of these people, all these Kurus, were annihilated. So because they harassed the devotees of the Lord. So apart from simply being burdens on the earth, they actually interfered with the devotees, and therefore the Lord had a greater interest in destroying them because of that. So all of this is ultimately the plan of the Supreme Lord. As is mentioned in the purport, the Lord accomplishes several purposes by his action. So one action was to destroy all the asuras. In this way, we relieve the burden of the earth, and we restore peace. And in this way, the devatas would be satisfied, earth would be satisfied. So that's one aspect of the battle of Kurukshetra in this particular arrangement. The other side of the pastime, of course, is that he empowered his devotees to act on his behalf, and he rewarded those devotees, and they became the rulers of the world. So because they were great devotees, they were given great powers by the Supreme Lord. So this shows the relationship between the Lord and his devotees. So though one aspect of the war was the killing of all the demons, etc., the other was the relationship he had with the Pandavas. So through this war, he illustrated his great affection for his devotees. So we see in Bhagavad Gita that Krishna is addressing Krishna as his friend, and he's willing to act on his behalf. He becomes his chariot driver, becomes his servant. He serves his devotee. So similarly, because the Pandavas acted on behalf of the Supreme Lord, acting as the nimitta, the Lord was very pleased, and he gave them everything. So they were the ones who were able to rule the world in a very perfect way after the annihilation of the enemies and relieving the earth of its burden. So the act not only established the earth in a peaceful way, he also established the position of the devotee. The Lord rewarded the devotee for his dedication to the Lord, and so the Pandavas became rulers of the whole world. So in this way, we have an example of devotees who succeed even by materialistic standards. So it's not that the Lord simply takes everything away from devotees and makes them poor. Rather, we see he rewards them and they get everything. So that question is asked also in the 10th canto. Why is it that Shiva's devotees become very rich even though Shiva is very poor? And why do Vishnu's devotees become very poor even though Vishnu is so wealthy in Vaikuntha? So look, they get opposite results. So that's a superficial conclusion. Ultimately, the devotees also get great prosperity. So here we see the Pandavas. They got the whole world to rule as a result of their devotion to the Lord. So it's not that the devotees always become poor, but of course devotees are not attached to anything. So we see the Pandavas also rejected everything after Lord Krishna's disappearance, and they went up to the Himalayas. So they were not attached to the kingdom for material reasons at all. But in any case, the Lord rewards his devotees in all sorts of ways. So giving them the earth as a kingdom was one of the ways in which he responded to the dedication of the Pandavas.
At the end of the 10th canto, it is said that this episode has happened before the Kurukshetra war, but it is being explained here for the convenience.
What is?
That part is explained in the 10th canto, though it happened before Kurukshetra war, certain Leelas.
Oh yeah.
So exactly which span of time the Kurukshetra war took place in this the sequences, what is explained in the 10th canto?
Well, this is explained in 10th canto in relation to the meeting of the people of Vrindavan with Krishna at Kurukshetra for the bathing during the time of the eclipse. So it's mentioned there that this happened before the Kurukshetra war, because the other Kauravas were also there, and they were all friendly. So, and later on they got killed. So obviously it had to be before the Kurukshetra war, even though that meeting is described quite late in the 10th canto. So actually it's described that after Krishna killed Kamsa, then he was in Mathura, then went to Dwarka, and then after that he went to Kurukshetra to meet the Brajavasis. So he said that was not such a long period of time after he had killed Kamsa, because they were still referring to that incident when they met in Kurukshetra, that they referred to this incident of Krishna killing Kamsa. So it wasn't so far. Whereas the Battle of Kurukshetra took place much later, because we see how there are many incidents where the Pandavas get banished, and then so many things happen, etc. And then finally the war takes place. So it took many, many years later. I don't know exactly which year it took, but many years later. So the meeting at Kurukshetra between the devotees of Vrindavan and Krishna took place quite early, and then this battle of Kurukshetra took place much later.
They became inimical to him. Did the Lord give them the strength to understand that it's very difficult to be against God and do the pastime? Bhishma was inimical to the Lord during Mahabharata war.
Well, they were actually not inimical. The devotees who were on the other side, we can say that it was for pastimes alone, because we see that Bhishma was actually a great devotee of the Lord, and he in no way had any enmity towards Krishna at all. Right, he's a great devotee of the Lord, but under circumstances he was put on the wrong side. So it was the nature of that family that within the Kuru dynasty we have devotees as well as demons. It's a mixture. And he happened to be on the wrong side at the wrong time, so he ended up fighting with him in the battle of Kurukshetra. So this also shows the great tragedy of the war, because the Pandavas had to fight people like Bhishma, whom they didn't want to fight at all. So there was good reason not to fight because of this. So therefore, it's not that they were eager to have battle and kill all the enemies. They were very reluctant to have the battle because they had to kill many people who were actually not their enemies at all. So it was a difficult decision to make, but it was the will of the Lord. So therefore, that was fulfilled. And Bhishma also got killed during the war as well. So again, will of the Supreme Lord. But in any case, we see that it's not a tragedy, because we see that the passing away of Bhishma is very glorious. There's nothing to do with the material world at all, in one sense. So it simply was a glorification of the devotee, in spite of the fact that he had to look like he died at that time.
Most avatars we find Lord coming in Kshatriya families, and all the pastimes of ending with gory war, killing and bloodshed.
Well, the avatar purpose is sometimes to restore dharma and destroy the demons. So often the Lord takes a Kshatriya form, like as in the case of Ramchandra also. But we can say that ultimately Krishna, in one sense, wasn't, because he was a Vaishya. He was a cowherd, actually. Then he was also a Kshatriya because he was divided. But again, he had to relieve the burden of the earth and restore dharma. So this was a convenient method by which he did it. But he again used the Pandavas as his means to do that. In other cases, of course, the Lord is, well, sometimes he's an animal. He's not even a human being. So he's a boar, or he's a fish, or he's a lion, or whatever. And sometimes he's very Brahminical. He's a sage, like Vedavyas, or Kapila Dev, or Dattatreya. So he can take the form of a Brahman sage also. So it's not really limited, but according to the purpose. So as a sage there, he teaches knowledge, he gives knowledge. So as Narayan, he teaches renunciation. As Kapila, he gives knowledge of bhakti and sankhya, etc. So as Vyasadeva, he gives all the Vedas and Puranas and Mahabharata, etc. So according to function, then the Lord may appear in different forms.
Maharaj, in the context of Bhishma, which we were just discussing, we also learn a lesson in Bhishma's pastimes. Every pore of his body had a arrow, and then even at that time, Krishna calls all the Yudhishthira, the Pandavas, to hear from Bhishma about the glories of devotional service.
Yeah.
So his consciousness is a pure devotional service. I mean, it's only the...
Yeah, of course we can say his body actually isn't material, so therefore he doesn't experience material pain, and in one sense he cannot even be injured by material weapons, just like Krishna, when he fights in the battle, he can't be injured at all, really. But for pastime's sake, it may look like he gets injured by an arrow or whatever like that. So the case with the devotees also, like Bhishma, it may appear that they are wounded and have arrows and they're in great pain, but actually ultimately they have spiritual bodies, so they're not really affected. So this is some arrangement for pastimes only.
In the context of, again, you are talking about the reward to the Pandavas, getting the kingdom back and ruling the entire... But in true sense, Maharaj, we understand that the devotee of the Lord has no desire for anything like Dhruva praise. I don't... he says that I unwantedly ask for this benediction, whereas pure devotional service is the ultimate benediction. So what is the value of such ruling the kingdom? It's actually a burden in one sense for a devotee to get into all the responsibilities.
So the same with the when the Rajasuya sacrifice was being held, actually Yudhishthira did not want to become the king or whatever, but what he wanted to do was show that everyone should offer everything to the Lord. So as the king of the world, then he would offer everything to Krishna and show by example that everyone else should do the same thing. So in other words, he was only employing everything in the service of the Supreme Lord. So that's the ideal nature of anyone, and of a king also. That he should use everything for the Lord, not that he wants to glorify himself. So therefore the position of being king of the world for the devotee's point of view is simply to utilize everything for the Supreme Lord and to engage everybody, the population, in service of the Supreme Lord. So it's setting a good example for others and preaching to others as well. That's from the devotee's point of view. From the Lord's point of view, he likes to give everything to the devotee. So therefore, he will give them all sorts of facility, and then they can use that however they wish, but they never use it for themselves. They use it to glorify the Lord.
Demons, they came in previous yugas, so that's the reason the Lord came personally or sent his representative. That means that Kali Yuga, the demons are not coming like Hiranyakashipu.
Well,
We are-
we find that at the end of Kali Yuga, we find because of the tamas is so strong and there's so many demons, and Kalki comes and kills everybody. We don't find any famous demon individually, but population in general is demonic. So therefore, Kalki comes and kills all these miscreants.
But on the contrary, when Mother Queen Kunti talks about Akinchana Gocharam, Krishna is the property of who is completely impoverished. I mean, Krishna is the property of those who is completely Akinchana Gocharam, Maharaj is mentioned.
Oh, okay. Yeah, without anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, of course, we can take that in a very gross way that the Lord is merciful to those who don't have anything. But we see that's not always true. We find millions of people in the material world who are poor, and the Lord's not that merciful to them also. But the other idea is that it's the attitude of the devotee, not so much the physical karma of the devotee or anyone. It's rather the attitude of the person that they don't have any idea of possessiveness for themselves. Now we have two types of people like that. We have those who are impersonalists and vairagis, etc. And then we have those who are practicing devotion. So the vairagis and gyanis, they practice detachment because it's a cause of bondage in the material world. The devotees practice a different type of vairagya, yukta vairagya. So they're detached only in the sense that they use everything for the Supreme Lord, not for themselves. So that's the real being akinchana. So they may not reject everything, but they have no personal attachment to anything, and they use everything for the Supreme Lord. So that's the real person that the Lord has attraction for. So they're dedicated fully to the Lord, and they use everything for the Supreme Lord.
Kolavecha Sridhar or Shuklamur Brahmachari, even when Kolavecha Sridhar was offered, he could have thought that he could have used it in the service of the Lord, but he said, I don't want anything, I just want pure devotional service.
Yeah, so in the material world, that of course we find even someone like Dhruva. He said, I don't want the kingdom, but then the Lord gave him the kingdom anyway. So the devotees in certain cases will think that these things are unfavorable for devotional service, so they don't want to use them. In other cases, they will accept them, as we see with the Pandavas, and then they use them for the Supreme Lord. Depends on their position also. Generally, if they're Brahminical, they will try to avoid. If they're Kshatriyas, they will accept, and then they will use everything for the Lord. So it depends on their particular position also in the Varnashram system.
Maybe the Lord wants to satisfy the initial material desire. Initially, Dhruva had material hankering.
Well,
Lord
that's the
says he
case of Dhruva. He originally had a hankering for
You
the
have to be
kingdom.
very careful not
So
to.
because you had that desire, I have to fulfill that desire also. So therefore and then Dhruva said, I don't want it, but then the Lord says you have to take it anyway. So therefore we have to be careful what we desire is one thing, because the Lord may give us something and then we don't think it's favorable afterwards, but then we have to take it anyway.
Just like buying a ticket and then think of cancelling it, we can't cancel it.
Yeah, so the Lord generally fulfills the desires of the devotees, so that means we have to be careful what we desire also.
But if one's devotion, in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, if one's devotion is so great, though he had an initial desire, if Krishna desired, he could have just taken him to the spiritual world without going through the process of so many millions of years in the material world.
Yeah. Well, he was also playing a role as in the Manu's dynasty, so he had to fulfill that role also, just as the Pandavas had to fulfill their role as Kshatriyas to help Krishna annihilate the burden of the earth. So Dhruva was in the dynasty there, coming from Swayambhuva Manu, so he had to rule for some period of time, just as the Prachetas also had to do and others had to do as well. So he had a role to fulfill as well in taking up the kingdom.
निरंतर श्रेष्ठ श्रीमद् भागवतम की